plan and implement VMware fault tolerance. So you've got this VM, right? And this is one of those really particularly critical VMs, right? Yeah, it's a database that can never go down. It's an application server that, when it fails, it takes the entire company with it. These are the really important, these are the really highly critical, almost mission critical virtual machines in your environment. And up until this point, well, we've provided some high availability ways or high availability features that you can add that keep the availability of these types of virtual machines very high, but it doesn't keep them really, really high or perfectly high. You know, even the Exchange server can go down from time to time. I mean, people get irritated when the Exchange server goes down, but you know what? If it drops for 5 or 10 minutes or even an hour some days, it's not going to be a real earth-shatteringly big deal in some situations. But every so often, there pops up this workload, this virtual machine that requires an extra level of high availability, super high availability, if you will. And in those situations, that's when the technology known as VMware fault tolerance comes into play. Now, VMware fault tolerance is not a feature to enable lightly. There are some fairly significant requirements that you place upon a virtual machine that's going to be protected by VMware fault tolerance. And you lose a lot at the same time. You lose some configuration control, and you lose some of the nice fun features that you normally tag to virtual machines. So you're not going to implement FT just everywhere. You're also, with FT, unlike with high availability with HA, you actually have to have really 2 copies of the virtual machine up and running at all times. So turning this on, again, is going to reduce the amount of resources you have available for other environments. But if all these describe that one virtual machine that you really just can't ever go down, well, in those cases, VMware fault tolerance might be a solution that can help protect that virtual machine. So in this nugget, I want to show you some of the ways in which you can turn on fault tolerance, how you configure it, what are the initial configurations that are required, and then how you also just turn it on for a virtual machine. Before we get there, however, I really want you to understand, again, what the architecture is of fault tolerance and what you could pay, or what you're going to pay, and what you can lose if you just turn this thing on without really seriously considering the consequences. You've seen this picture before. This picture we looked at earlier, and it's got a 3-host environment there, and I've got 2 healthy servers. I've got a server that's just failed, and because that server has failed, well, these virtual machines now have failed over to the new host. This is the concept of VMware HA. And in an HA environment, as I mentioned, the loss of that host, when that host goes down, right, when you unplug the power cable off the back of that host, well, these virtual machines, they're going to die with the death of the host because they only exist in one place. You pull power from a host, and there's just no way that virtual machines can continue to process on that host. So while HA is a solution for providing higher availability for virtual machines, anytime you do lose a server, you're going to lose those VMs for just a very short period of time. How long does it take to boot a VM? I don't know, a couple of minutes? Less, generally, than what it takes to boot an equivalent host these days, because the boot process is so well streamlined. So while HA does indeed provide higher availability for certain VMs, you're not going to get complete availability in the case of a loss. So that's really what the use case that fault tolerance is designed to fix. So let's say I got this really important VM here. When I turn on fault tolerance for that really important VM, I actually create a pair for that VM, a mate for that VM, and essentially another VM